Charles de Gaulle Airport, August 2, 2005. The Airbus A340-313 passenger aircraft of Air France is preparing to operate intercontinental flight AFR 358 on the route Paris-Toronto. On board the aircraft, there are 309 people, 297 passengers, and 12 crew members. And a very experienced crew is getting ready to operate the Airbus. The aircraft commander is 57-year-old Alain Rose. The second officer is 43-year-old Frederick Node. Both pilots were characterized within the company as sufficiently qualified, competent, and communicative. The captain, not knowing anyone from the crew, quickly became friends with the senior flight attendant. Both pilots had never flown together before, although they had crossed paths once. Both arrived at the airport 2.5 hours before departure, well-rested and without signs of fatigue. According to European aviation regulations, there should be one flight attendant for every 50 passengers. With nearly 300 passengers, the minimum crew consisted of 6 flight attendants. There were 10 flight attendants on board our liner, including 1 trainee stewardess. Preparing for departure, the crew received a weather forecast at the destination airport indicating a possibility of thunderstorms. Therefore, an additional 3,000 kilograms of aviation fuel were loaded into the airliner's tanks for an additional 23 minutes of delay with landing in Toronto. After that, the crew began taxiing to the runway. As agreed between the pilots, the captain would control the aircraft during takeoff and the first half of the flight, while the second officer would handle the second half of the flight and the landing. At 13:53 local time, the controller gave our crew permission to take off, and the A340 aircraft took off from the runway at Paris Airport and headed for Toronto. 2 hours into the flight, the crew sent a request via the ACHAR system to track potential alternate airports in northeastern Canada due to possible worsening weather conditions at the destination. However, according to the forecast received for 16 o'clock, there were good weather conditions at Toronto Airport and the Niagara Falls Alternate Aerodrome, with no thunderstorm activity observed. Then, through the ATS system, the crew received a weather forecast for 16 o'clock at Toronto Airport, which indicated good vertical and horizontal visibility with light winds. After reaching the halfway point, the captain handed over control of the flight to the second officer. At this point, the aircraft was flying at the assigned 360 flight level, or at an altitude of 10,950 meters. At 17:50, the crew informed the airline of the approximate landing time at 19:39. However, the airline representatives, upon receiving this information, did not inform the crew that a red alert 3 inches had been declared at Toronto Airport, as it was simply not within their duties. At 18:49, the crew receives a weather forecast via METER for airports in Niagara Falls, McDonald-Cartier, Ottawa, and Cleveland Hopkins, Ohio, USA. Thunderstorms were observed in the first airport to the northwest, moving southeast, while no thunderstorms were observed at the other 2 airports. At this point, approximately 12 tons of aviation fuel remain in the tanks, and according to the crew's calculations, they would have 8.5 tons remaining upon arrival. The crew selects Cleveland Hopkins as the alternate airport. By this time, a thunderstorm front is approaching Toronto, and the weather is rapidly deteriorating. At 19:03, the crew contacts Toronto on the Kilalo control and requests a weather briefing. Despite being informed of thunderstorms and heavy rain at Toronto Airport, our crew decides to proceed to Toronto while avoiding the thunderstorm cells, with the option to divert to the alternate aerodrome in Cleveland in case of severe weather conditions. The aircraft aligns with the radio beacon and is 30 kilometers from the end of the runway. Upon commencing descent, the crew extends the flaps to the second position and lowers the landing gear. The sky above Toronto Airport is covered with very dark clouds. There is severe turbulence, and a torrential rain is falling. Meteorological conditions vary from visual to instrumental. At an altitude of 460 meters above the ground, the crew observes half of the runway and occasionally the entire length. The runway is flooded, giving it a shiny surface, with lightning observed on both sides and at the far end. The approach is conducted under autopilot and auto throttle control at a speed of 260 kilometers per h. As the aircraft reaches a height of 100 meters above the ground, the second officer disengages the autopilot and a few seconds later, the auto throttle. Sensing a decrease in speed and descent of the aircraft, he increases the engine power from 42% to 82% N1. This action causes the airliner to now climb above the glide path. Simultaneously, the wind changes from crosswind to tailwind at a speed of 5 mph. At 12 meters above the glide path, the airliner crosses the threshold of runway 24L and enters the zone of torrential rain with flashes of lightning, causing a sharp drop in visibility. The second officer pulls the side stick back, raising the nose of the aircraft in an attempt to reduce speed, and then sets the engines to idle. At 20:01, Flight AFR 358 touches down at the midpoint of runway 24L, which is 2743 meters long. The right landing gear almost aligns with the center line. Upon touchdown, the spoilers automatically deploy as the wheels make contact with the concrete. The pilots immediately apply maximum manual braking and begin to align the aircraft with the runway. However, it takes 12 seconds from the moment of touchdown for the crew to engage reverse thrust, but these actions prove insufficient. Traveling the remaining length of the runway at a speed of 148 km per h, the Airbus A340 rolls beyond its limits and falls into a ravine. The tower controller observes Flight 358 exiting the runway, followed by bright orange flashes. A maximum alert, Alpha 1, is declared at the airport, mobilizing all fire and rescue services. In the initial moments after the aircraft comes to a stop, flight attendants open the exits and begin evacuating passengers, as orange flames are observed on the left side. Due to the loss of power, emergency lighting is not operational. Equipped with a flashlight, the second officer, along with the senior flight attendant and one of the flight attendants, checks the entire cabin and lavatories, ensuring all passengers are evacuated. They then return to the front of the cabin and exit the aircraft through the front door, having to jump as the emergency slide did not fully deploy. Despite a back injury, the captain also attempts to inspect the aircraft, but is forced to retreat due to smoke, leaving the aircraft through the right front door. The second officer is the last to exit the aircraft. All passengers and crew members are successfully evacuated before fire blocks the exit routes, and within an hour, the aircraft is engulfed and destroyed, with only the cockpit, both wings and engines, NOAA 2 and NOAA 4, relatively intact. The crash of Flight AFR 358 was investigated by the Transportation Safety Board of Canada, TSB. The final report of the investigation was published on December 12, 2007. According to the investigation, several key factors contributed to the accident. These included adverse weather conditions combined with the crew's reluctance to make a decision to go around for another landing attempt. Additionally, the delayed actions of the crew during the landing, including the late application of reverse thrust, were identified as contributing factors. The airliner touched down significantly beyond the designated touchdown zone, landing further than one-third of the runway length. The pilots applied reverse thrust belatedly, but were unable to stop within the runway limits, causing the aircraft to roll beyond its boundaries and crash into a ravine. The impact with the ground resulted in a fire that engulfed the aircraft within minutes. However, all 309 people on board were evacuated in a timely manner. The evacuation of 309 passengers and crew took less than 2 minutes, which many, including Canadian Transport Minister Jean Lapierre, described as a miracle, highlighting the professionalism of the flight attendants. In terms of the number of people on board, this incident became the largest in the history of the Airbus A340 aircraft. Within 1 week of the accident, passengers were provided with monetary compensation ranging from $1,000 to $3,700. Following a 4.5-year legal process, Air France settled a compensation claim with 184 out of 297 passengers, excluding crew members, on board Flight 358. The total compensation amount was $12 million. According to the summary of the decision, Air France agreed to pay $10 million and was released from any further claims related to the incident. Airbus and Goodrich, the company that manufactured the aircraft's emergency evacuation system, agreed to pay $1.65 million, and the lawsuit against them was withdrawn. J.J. Camp, a lawyer from Vancouver representing the plaintiffs, stated that passengers who suffered serious physical or psychological injuries were entitled to a maximum payout of $175,000. Passengers who did not suffer serious injuries as a result of the accident would receive a minimum payout ranging from $5,000 to $10,000.